first, here's a quick disclaimer. Most Elden Ring lore YouTubers and lore videos are very calm and collected and have all of their stuff structured out very well. I don't. I have none of these things because it just doesn't feel very natural for me to do so. This is more like a Discord call at 3 AM with a friend who just discovered a new hyperfixation. This is what this is supposed to be like, or this is the vibe I'm trying to go for here. Oh, and also spoilers for the Elden Ring DLC and specifically the end boss of the Elden Ring DLC, and a lot of big lore implications. So I'm gonna assume that you have the base knowledge of Elden Ring lore. If you don't, it doesn't matter, and I'm just gonna hope you enjoy listening to my voice for a bit. So let's get started. So this video is about Mohg, and in honor of him beating the allegations, I wanted to look a bit deeper into his lore, and especially his connection to the DLC and his place in the world of the DLC, so in the Land of Shadow. I think after 2 years of being the joke in the fandom, he deserves a bit more consideration, because I think this DLC is as much about him as it is about Radahn and Miquella. And I found some pretty interesting and compelling stuff that makes his story even more tragic in the context of the DLC, and I'd like to share that. Because what's more FromSoft than having to kill a character to get access to the knowledge that redeems the character we just killed? That just seems very From Software. So this all started because I was wondering why Mohg wasn't more present in the design of the final boss. And this is an attempt to give Mohg a larger role in the DLC, and I think he deserves that, especially after 2 years of being the biggest joke in the entire community. Mohg is the key to entering the DLC, and he's one of the 2 bosses we actually need to beat in order to gain access to the DLC. And the physical entrance point to the DLC is also right in his boss arena. Once we enter the Shadow Realm, we meet Miquella's followers, and amongst these followers is a Pureblood Knight, one of the former followers of Mohg. This is Sir Ansbach, and he's my favorite NPC alongside Egon. So as we progress the story of the DLC, at one point Miquella's Great Rune breaks, and the charms he placed on his followers are also lifted. After this, Ansbach's attitude towards Miquella shifts drastically.
Kindly Miquella has discarded his Great Rune. The fog that vexed my aging faculties has been lifted, and follies better left forgotten haunt me once again. Once, in an attempt to free Lord Mohg from his enchantment, I challenged tender Miquella, only to have my own heart rather artfully stolen. I knew not how weak I was. I believed that with sufficient mastery, even an Empyrean would be within reach of my blade. I could not have been more mistaken. Miquella the Kind is a monster, pure and radiant. He wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
And here it is, finally, the confirmation that some people have been waiting for 2 years, that Mohg is in fact not a Mohglaster, and he beat the allegations, and he was under the influence of Miquella all along. A small part of the community always believed that Mohg was just charmed by Miquella, because, you know, that's what Miquella does. It's his whole thing. He charms people and he influences them and he forces them to love him. So it was a pretty natural conclusion that some people thought that he did that to Mohg. But it also confirms that we have no idea who Mohg actually was. And as a Pureblood Knight, Ansbach is probably the closest thing we can get to getting a glimpse at who Mohg was before Miquella charmed him, as well as maybe give us an insight into the actual goals of the Mohgwyn dynasty and Mohg's plans before Miquella interfered. So I want to do that. So Ansbach is very sound of mind and calm and rational. He also feels extremely guilty that he couldn't free Mohg from the enchantment. He even went as far as to fight an Empyrean. He challenged Miquella to free Mohg, and it didn't work. Miquella charmed him as well, and yet he still feels guilty even after challenging one of the strongest demigods in the entire Elden Ring universe. And he lost. I mean, of course he lost. Of course he got charmed, and he still feels guilty, and he still thinks that Mohg deserves better. Also, the voice acting is just fantastic, so that helps him a lot.
Righteous tarnished. Miquella the Kind makes my blood run cold. I am loath to admit it, but even at this very instant I wish to run very far away indeed.
The voice acting might also be the reason why Ansbach comes off as one of the sanest NPCs in the entire game. He doesn't seem malicious or like a creep like Varys is, and the guy was ready to fight an Empyrean for his master. Again, an Empyrean. He fought an Empyrean to free Mohg. That's the level of devotion we're speaking with here. And who was Mohg? That he could have sparked such an intense loyalty and a strong and lasting devotion in Ansbach. A character that is so rational and reasonable, going so far just makes me more interested in who Mohg was before the enchantment, that he could have left such a strong loyalty in Ansbach.
Righteous Tarnished. It's been some time. After unburdening my soul to you, I had hoped to make a fresh start, but there was one thought I could not dislodge from my mind. So, here I am, quite unable to move on.
Ansbach is plagued by so much guilt, even through, again, he challenged an Empyrean, I'm not getting over this. A mind-controlling Empyrean, mind you, and he can't let it go. And he's still so loyal to his master that even after his death he can't let it go, and he needs to make sure that Mohg escaped Miquella's enchantment in the end.
After Lord Mohg's slaying at his dynastic palace, it appears his body has been absconded with, and taken straight to kind Miquella. Surely you recall that I once served Lord Mohg as a pureblood knight, after failing him in every regard, and losing sight of my vows. I'd do anything to make amends, in whatever meager way I can. What could they possibly have in mind for Lord Mohg's remains? The implications are rather unnerving.
We find out that after we killed Mohg, his body was taken straight to Miquella, so Ansbach gets confirmation that his master still can't have a moment of peace and is still a pawn to Miquella. But from this we also learn that Miquella needed Mohg's body for something, apparently. Mohg's role in the story of the DLC extends beyond being the gatekeeper and bearing our way to the Shadow Realm.
Well, what's this? Yes, I should have known. Even the truth was itself mere folly. As if using Lord Mohg to gain entrance to the Land of Shadow were not enough, he plans to use his corpse as the vessel of his king consort. He has forsaken Lord Mohg's soul. He desires only his empty shell. It beggars belief, but I'm afraid tender Miquella fails to grasp the humiliation implied by this act. One thing is certain. My dear lord deserved better.
What we know of Mohg so far, thanks to Ansbach, is that Miquella needed him to enter the Shadow Realm, and also that Miquella plans to use Mohg's body for the soul of his consort. On that note, the soul Miquella wants to put into Mohg's body is Redan's, the two bosses we have to defeat to enter the DLC. So basically we supplied Miquella with both the soul and the vessel for his perfect consort. Miquella needed Mohg to enter the Land of Shadows, but he also planned to use his body as a vessel for someone else's soul. The first part of this contradicts the idea that Mohg might have kidnapped Miquella before he was charmed, but Mohg was an essential part of the plan Miquella had in becoming a god, and I think that extends to his body as well. This is such an important thing that it wouldn't really make sense for Miquella to put his consort in any random body or the first best body he could find. And this is why I think Mohg was chosen as a vessel for a specific reason. The final boss of the DLC is Redan's soul in Mohg's body, and yet Mohg doesn't really have an influence on the final design of the boss. At first this didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I began to look for the things that do carry over from Mohg's design in the final fight. His omen horns and the blood flame. So before I really get into this, I'm just gonna say that I'm a sucker for tragic characters, and I came up with a theory that makes this whole thing even more tragic for Mohg. And I hope you like it, because I've been having brainworms about this for weeks. And here we go. A really important part of the DLC is highlighting the different cultures in the Land of Shadow compared to the lands between. This is especially prominent when we look at the religious practices and the beliefs of the inhabitants of the Land of Shadow. Firstly, the Hornsent. One of the main groups in the Land of Shadow are the Hornsent. The Hornsent were the main target group of the religious crusade led by Mesmer because of what they did to America's people, which it's a different topic and it's also very, very disturbing. Typical, more like it's giving Bloodborne. It's giving Bloodborne, to be honest, but I'm not gonna get into all of that right now. But they were the main target of the crusade led by Mesmer, and their own religion conflicts with the Golden Order, because the Hornsent's religion is centered around the Crucible, and this includes worshipping the Crucible and aspects of the Crucible, especially physical attributes that are seen as blessings from the Crucible, such as feathers, scales, and horns. Very curly and spirally horns were revered especially and seen as great blessings. The one physical attribute of Mohg, Miquella allowed to remain unchanged on his consort's body. I mean, look at Mohg, his horns are even more curly than some of the religious idols worshipped by the Hornsent. And unlike Morgoth, Mohg didn't even cut or trim his horns, to the point where he allowed even one of them to pierce his eyes. So I think the Hornsent would have considered Mohg to be blessed by the Crucible, if not even seeing him as like a saint figure, or a holy figure in general. Maybe he'd even be a godlike figure to them, in his own right, completely without Miquella. Mohg would have had a very high standing in their culture and amongst the Hornsent, I think. And all of that because of an appearance that got him prosecuted and ostracized in the Lands Between. In the Lands Between, omens are not even allowed to keep their horns unless they're born to royalty, and even then they're locked in the sewer because they're such a shame and no one should see them. This reinforces the idea that the omen persecution in the Lands Between was something spearheaded, or at least supported by America, and that the persecution of the omen was most likely in order to exclude and demonize them in the culture, and not necessarily due to them actually being seen as graceless by the greater will. That makes sense? So Miquella kept an aspect of Mohg that represents the Hornsent and their beliefs. But there's one other aspect of Mohg that carries over into the final fight, and that's Mohg's blood flame. So the blood flame and the associated outer god, the Formless Mother, are worshipped by the second largest group of people in the Land of Shadow, the Blood Fiends. So the Blood Fiend's sacred spear tells us that it's used as an instrument of communion with an outer god, and that it is one of the most significant implements used in blood rituals. Great Spear of the Blood Fiend Hexers, one of the most significant implements used in their blood rituals. Sacred spears of blood are the instrument of communion with an outer god. The Mother of Truth desires a wound. And this description is almost exactly the same as the one we get for the weapon from Mohg's remembrance. Trident of Mohg, Lord of Blood, a sacred spear that will come to symbolize his dynasty. As well as serving as a weapon, it is an instrument of communion with an outer god who bestows power upon accursed blood. The Mother of Truth desires a wound. It's the same description, it's the same outer god. Mohg encountered the Formless Mother in the sewers and she gave him the power to create blood flame. Which is funny, like, whilst Morgoth was fostering his mommy issues because of America, Mohg just went out there and got a new mom. It's good for him. But here's another culture in the Land of Shadows that heavily overlaps with what we know of Mohg. And same with the Hornsent, I think the Blood Fiends would have seen Mohg as some sort of religious authority, or, I mean, he is blessed by the Formless Mother, their goddess, so he would definitely hold some high position in their religious cult. Again, in the Lands Between, the Formless Mother is an opposing force to the Greater Will, another outer god, so worshipping her is likely seen as some form of heresy or blasphemy even. And from the base game, we only know the Formless Mother as the patron goddess of Mohg's cult, I think. But again, Mohg's cult also became centered around Miquella by the time we encounter them, so we don't really know what part of the cult was only installed to help Miquella go into the Land of Shadow, and what was actually authentically the original Mohgwyn dynasty. And yet, in the Land of Shadow, the Formless Mother is worshipped by the second biggest group of people living there. So presumably Mohg would have had a relatively high standing in their society. And this is the other thing Miquella kept for his consort. This and the horns. So on one hand we have the Hornsent who worship the Crucible, and on the other hand we have the Blood Fiends who worship the Formless Mother. We don't even have to look very deep to see how Mohg would have fit into this world, so it's very obvious that he has a position in this world that would have been the complete opposite of what he had in the lands between. In the Land of Shadow, he wouldn't be seen as a freak that had to be locked in a sewer and kept away from the population, or even a madman living underground in his blood lake, worshipping the bloodthirsty outer god. And this is just by the virtue of his body, as in his horns and his blood. There is a place where Mohg, Morgoth, and all the other omens, and possibly even the Arbonorics, would have been safe, and even revered by the people there, where their mere existence would be seen as a blessing instead of a curse, and they didn't have access to that. And much like the Golden Order did, disregarding the actual cultural differences and quality of life Mohg might have had here, Miquella reduced his importance to the aspects of his body that reflect the people he wants to show compassion to. Miquella might be insane or too naive to realize that his age of compassion is not one of free will, but he chose Mohg as the vessel for his consort because it represents the people Marika has wronged with her religious crusade. The Hornsent, of course, they have their own very problematic history, and the Formless Mother is still sketchy as fuck. But on a surface level, Miquella shows them his compassion by having a consort that embodies the things they were prosecuted for by his mother. It wouldn't matter either way because he would force them into loving him anyway, as he did with Mohg and might have even done with Radahn. But that would mean he had a consort that is both perfect in spirit and in body to rule alongside him in the Land of Shadow. Concerning Radahn, consensual or not, and I'm leaning towards it later if I'm being honest, Radahn's soul is shoved into a body that, according to the Golden Order, according to the group Radahn led his life by, is not only seen as unworthy of grace because it's an omen body, but also corrupted by an outer god. Consensual, I doubt Radahn would be happy with that. I doubt Radahn would be happy with any of that. However, even here, Miquella might have thought that he was doing Radahn a favor by putting him into the body of Godfrey's only remaining son, if we want to be this morbid, because if we know one thing about Radahn, it's that he worships Godfrey. And Mohg is the direct descendant of Godfrey. Putting Radahn's soul in Mohg's body is probably the closest he could get to being part of Godfrey's lineage. And as disturbing as it is, it would be exactly the kind of shallow gesture I would expect from Miquella. And it's so disrespectful to both Mohg as well as Radahn that it just kind of fits. It's so bad, but it fits. So this has been my attempt to give Mohg a bigger significance in the DLC, and especially one that goes beyond the joke that he beat the allegations. Because we started with a joke that he has allegations, and now the only thing we talk about is that he beat the allegations, and I think that doesn't progress his character in any way. So yeah, I want to finish this off with a return to Sir Ansbach, because again, I love him. And what the conclusion of his questline might tell us about Mohg and the philosophy behind his dynasty originally.
Righteous Tarnished. That was an astounding battle, to be sure. Now I suppose this leaves only one. But in truth, I cannot calm my quivering. Challenging a god is no small matter. Oh. Something you want to get off your chest? Well, you needn't worry. It was you, wasn't it? Who defeated Lord Mohg. Fear not. I bear no grudge against you. His Eminence was felled in an honorable duel. And such are the risks of seeking lordship. Besides, what right have I to complain? I blame the enchantment more than anything. Righteous Tarnished. We will have our victory. I swear upon my blood.
So I took Sir Ansbach with me to the final fight. And at one point I seriously considered just leaving him out because I needed to summon someone to help me. But at that point, I went in there so many times with him, and I've heard him say his lines so many times. I heard him say his vow to give Mohg his dignity back so many times that it almost felt personal. I wanted to give Mohg his dignity back at that point, and Ansbach should be there when I do so. He deserves to be there when it happened. And in my final attempt, Sir Ansbach was there with me, but he died just before I finally won. And I'd like to believe that his final words to the Tarnished are as much a reflection of who Mohg was as they are a reflection of who Ansbach is. Become a lord not for gods, but for men. And in the end, Mohg might have been a crazy maniac with a weird blood cult, or he might have been like someone who carved out a place where omens and Albinaurics were safe from the prosecution of the Golden Order. The Morgwan Palace Dynasty Grounds are the only place in the game where Albinaurics are not immediately hostile towards the player. I mean, I know what you did to them. I did the same thing because those runes are runes that I need for leveling up. I don't know what you want me to say. It's just, I know what you did. I did it too. The Sacred Relic Sword is really good for that. So yeah, I get it. But it is still the only place where the Albinaurics seem to be just chilling, just safe, just hanging around until we come by and do the thing with the Relic Sword. This might be because I like a good tragic character, or because I think it would be pretty boring if Mohg was really just a bloodthirsty maniac. And just bad writing if Miquella chose the first best body available, when he apparently put so much thought into who his consort's soul should be. And making Mohg nothing more than a bloodthirsty maniac would also undermine Sir Ansbach and his entire character and his genuine devotion to Mohg, as well as his wish for the Tarnished to become a lord not for gods but for men. The thing is, Mohg is not some precious Pookie Bear. I don't know who he was, and will most likely never find out who Mohg actually was without Miquella mind control. Thing is, he could have been any of these things, and had so much potential that goes beyond the joke of him going from being a Moglester to being Moglested. There's so much potential for Mohg's character to be explored, and I just had to get my thoughts on this out there, because there's so much potential that we can tap into and just look at and analyze, that I'm going insane if I don't do it anytime soon. So here it is. I haven't seen any lore channels talk about it. It would be insane to expect that, because the game came out like 2 weeks ago, and this is a lot of effort because their videos, like Smotown and Vati, their videos are so high quality and so good. I can't expect them to talk about exactly the thing I want to hear. So I'm gonna do it myself. I just need to get this out so I can sleep in peace. And Mohg is my precious little baby girl. I don't care. Look at Rykard, he's not better. Mohg's my precious little baby girl now, and he deserves rest, and I love Sir Ansbach, as well as...
Curse you, Bale! I hereby vow you will rue this day. Behold, a true great warrior, and I, Egon, your fears made flesh.